Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
Have filed this lawsuit with the hopes of showing the state how unconstitutional its present actions are.
The state and the governor sued by public defenders.
What is a river sediment diversion and how is it different than a freshwater diversion?
Challenging a key of the Coastal Master Plan.
That's a world record, guys.
The story of a Louisiana grapefruit that grew and grew and grew. Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha Williams.
And I'm Andre Moreau. Much more on those top stories in a moment on this week's edition of SWI. But first, we know many of us are keeping an eye on Major Hurricane Dorian as it threatens Florida this Labor Day weekend.
And this week, August 29th specifically, marked the 14th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina and its deadly impact on New Orleans, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Katrina forever changed the landscape of our coast and claimed more than 1,300 lives.
And we remember those victims. Now a check on other news making headlines. President Trump has approved a major disaster declaration for areas of the state affected by Hurricane Barry. Barry made landfall near Intracoastal City July 13th as a Cat 1 storm. Wind and rain began impacting coastal areas as early as July 10th. The declaration makes federal money available for the parishes of Allen, Iberia, Lafourche, Plaquemines, St. Mary, Terrebonne, and Vermilion. A sunken barge in Bayou Chene that acted as a temporary floodgate was moved this week, opening the waterway to maritime traffic. The CPRA, Coastal Protection Restoration Authority, says the barge helped protect Lower St. Martin and St. Mary parishes from backwater flooding from Barry and its 4-foot storm surge. The agency pledged to build an $80 million permanent floodgate and levee protection system in the area. The State Board of Regents this week adopted a new roadmap for the state's public colleges and universities. The roadmap seeks to improve educational attainment for black students and get more adults back into the classroom to learn new skills. The Regents unanimously approved the plan, which strives for a higher achievement goal, with 6 in 10 working-age adults holding a college degree or credential beyond a high school diploma by the year 2030. Fewer than half of our adults aged 25 to 64 currently have achieved that benchmark. This is the first wholesale revamp since the master plan was developed nearly 20 years ago. Governor John Bel Edwards announced plans to establish a major cybersecurity center in Baton Rouge to be located on the water campus. The center will promote a safer cyber community through information sharing, training, and partnering among federal and state agencies, academia, and industry experts. It's also expected to generate dozens of new jobs. Testing the freeze tolerance of sugarcane is the goal of planting one of the world's northernmost sugarcane fields located at an LSU research station in central Louisiana. LSU's Ag Center is looking into how well various varieties can survive chilly weather. The area historically is considered too far north for tall tropical grass. Sugar is looking attractive to farmers, though, because federal programs keep prices of domestic raw sugar above that of imports, and the state's recent crops have been good. The trade war with China has also severely cut the market for soybeans. Baton Rouge this week became the best place in the state and the nation to buy gas, with the lowest average price at $2.07 a gallon. The Lundberg survey says an abundant supply of crude oil is a major factor for the decrease at the pump. The average price for gas nationwide is $2.66 a gallon, with Honolulu showing the highest average at $3.57 a gallon. More than 3,500 AT&T workers in Louisiana and 20,000 unionized workers in 9 states returned to work Wednesday after a 4-day strike. The union claimed the corporate giant did not send negotiators with the power to make decisions at the bargaining table, but they have since dropped those charges and returned to negotiations. I Voted stickers created by Lafayette artist Tony Bernard will return to polling places across the state for the fall elections. This new sticker features a brown pelican, the state bird, wearing a crown centered in a rendition of the state seal. More than 3 million stickers have been printed and will be available for the October 12th primary and November 16th runoff elections and during early voting. Voters are choosing Louisiana's governor, 6 other statewide leaders, 144 state lawmakers, and an array of local officials. And speaking of the elections, if you have a question you want asked during the LPB Cable Council for a Better Louisiana Governor's Debate, which is September 26th from the campus of UL Lafayette, send it to us at lpb.org/debate. You can see the link right there on your screen.
The Southern Poverty Law Center and 2 prominent law firms have filed a lawsuit against the state, the governor, and the Louisiana Public Defender Board. The lawsuit claims the state's public defender system is so poorly funded, it fails to protect the rights of people who cannot afford a lawyer. 33-year-old Jacob Israel is the first to admit he grew up fast and began hanging in the streets of South Baton Rouge at an early age.
Of course, my mom did what any mother would do and try to send me to school and keep me away from things. But once you have your mind made up, it's nothing much more mama can really do.
He says he grew up very poor.
We didn't have much coming up, so I wanted things, right? I see everybody else having different things. I see people dressing nice.
Israel says while many kids his age were riding bikes, he had already turned to a life of crime.
My first time ever being on probation, I was 12 years old. Now remember, I started at 11. Now I was 12 years old. The charge was possession of stolen goods, right? Okay, I wanted nice things. I couldn't afford them, right? Stole them.
But it was a crime he was accused of a few years later as an adult that he says would show him what can happen when you don't get an attorney fighting for you.
To go and get it over with, I was told by the public defender, this is your first time being convicted. They're only going to give you probation. So just go up and plead guilty to the charge, and they're going to give you probation. You go home. You walk free up out of here.
Israel says the same attorney represented both he and his girlfriend, and because of that attorney's advice, they both cut a deal pleading guilty for the same crime, a crime she didn't commit.
If I did knew that, then I wouldn't have went in ignorantly and pled guilty.
Indigent defendants statewide, which make up roughly 85% of the people who are accused of crimes, are systematically being denied or at risk of being denied their constitutional rights to counsel.
Jamila Johnson is an attorney with the Southern Poverty Law Center and counsel to more than a dozen plaintiffs who are suing the governor and the State Public Defender Board, claiming Louisiana's indigent defense system violates both the federal and state constitution and, like Israel, feel they were not given good legal advice.
It's a major issue because without an attorney to represent you, you risk the possibility of getting poor defense. You risk the possibility of being convicted of crimes you didn't commit. You risk the possibility of staying in jail longer than you should, of not getting someone to vigorously advocate for your rights. Also, in Louisiana, disproportionately, the individuals who are accused of crimes who are indigent are communities of color, particularly Black Louisianans.
She says it's a problem that has plagued the system for decades, and because the system is so broken, it's led to mass incarceration in the state.
In Louisiana, this system and the problems with this system are impacting Louisianans' lives and also Louisiana's incredibly high incarceration rate.
Funding for public defense in Louisiana has historically come under criticism locally, nationally. Structurally, it's deficient. It's a user pay criminal legal system we have here. And so we depend on the fines and fees paid by people going through the system to make sure the system runs. Now, every system in the country has fines and fees. None of them actually depend on them to run their systems.
Derwyn Bunton is Chief Public Defender with the Orleans Parish Public Defenders. He says statewide public defenders get about 2/3 of their operating budget from those fines and fees.
So when you're that dependent on the fines and fees, any fluctuation makes things difficult. And what we've seen historically is that it's been inadequate, unreliable, and unstable. When you depend on the most vulnerable, the poorest folks in your community for the revenue to run something as important as your criminal legal system, you're going to have problems, and we've seen that in Louisiana.
Studies show the workload of some Louisiana public defenders is almost 5 times what it should be, and because of the number of clients each attorney represents, it's difficult to do everything you need to do for the people whose lives are literally in your hands.
They know what's missing, and we know what's missing. And so when you have funding that doesn't meet your resource needs, when you can't do the job you're called upon to do, it can become really frustrating. So our lawyers work incredibly hard trying to fill gaps that they know exist in the resources that they're allowed to bring to bear for poor people in our community who are charged with crimes. But it's still very difficult. For example, right now, because of resource problems, we don't have enough investigators. And so what that means is, for some cases, there is no investigator assigned. The lawyer has to try and figure out how to do investigation on their own, along with handling their workload, which is more than state and national standards say they should be allowed to have over the course of a year.
He says statewide public defenders not only bear the burden of trying to give the best legal advice under extremely trying circumstances, but because of major budget issues they face, the uncertainty of the future.
As an attorney in our office, you know you have a lot of cases. What you don't know is, are you going to have investigation, or are you not? Are you going to have any support services for your client, or are you not? Those are the kinds of things that make it very difficult to do your job. Are you going to have a job? Are you going to be furloughed? Are you going to be laid off?
Bunton says his annual budget is not nearly what it needs to be, considering his office and others like it around the state are asked to defend 85% of the people accused of breaking the law.
Anyone looking knows that our criminal legal system right now is not structured to be fair. We lack equity in how funding is distributed amongst the criminal legal system in Louisiana and in New Orleans in particular. Anyone looking knows that the odds are not in our favor for doing the job we need to do. And so you're spending tons of money to find, catch, cage, prosecute people, but you're spending very little to make sure it's done right.
Grace and peace. What's going on today?
Israel, who feels he was a victim of the overburdened public defender system, has turned his life around. The business owner and minister works to teach others at his church how to live a law-abiding life.
And the scripture says, "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again."
He says something must be done to fix the inadequate public defender system, although for many, the lawsuit addressing the issue comes too late.
What about those brothers and those sisters who have took the advice from the public defender who was underfunded and knew for a fact he couldn't offer nobody no righteous advice to keep them free?
We received this statement from the governor's office Thursday. It says, quote, Governor Edwards recognizes the important work done by public defenders across the state, the enormity of their caseloads, and he agrees that they should have resources necessary to represent their clients effectively. However, funding for the Louisiana Public Defender Board is a responsibility of the Louisiana legislature. He continues, and I quote, now that the fiscal cliff has been addressed and Louisiana has a stable budget for the first time in a decade, the governor will work with the legislature to address the challenges facing public defenders in the state, end quote.
In light of recent flood events, even going back several years, I was curious to know about the latest research by scientists at LSU's Center for River Studies. It operates in partnership with the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority, the CPRA. I also wanted to get reaction to the continued conflicting views about river diversions. I went to the center to find out. You know, it's fun to see this place when people are actually on it working like they are right now.
Oh yeah, and they do a great job. It's a great place.
Dr. Clint Wilson teaches civil engineering at LSU and heads up the CPRA-funded Center for River Studies located on the water campus in Baton Rouge. On this day, master's students are running models and comparing data from the actual Mississippi River to this scaled-down laboratory. The model is able to replicate the flow, water levels, and sediment transport of the river, where 1 year is simulated in 1 hour.
The current work we're doing is to support, the state's planning for operation of sediment diversions. And so we've got to at least do some experiments, or we're doing experiments that match up data-wise with the previous and other current work that's going on.
The concept of river diversions is not a new one, and construction of sediment diversions is a key piece of the state's coastal master plan to build and maintain land and to slow down land loss. Two large diversions, the Mid-Barataria and Mid-Breton sediment diversion projects, are expected to cost $2.2 billion. They are a cornerstone of the CPRA and state's effort to rebuild rapidly eroding marshes. But a recent study led by LSU researcher and oceanography professor Dr. Gene Turner says the benefits of river diversions might not outweigh the drawbacks. The study was published in Restoration Ecology.
I recognize it's a planning effort. It's a large ship we have, the coastal land loss, and we have a very small rudder. And I'm just one messenger of all the science messengers we have, and we're all trying to do the right thing. And we're trying to be precautionary, not trying to fix things afterwards. We want to get this right the first time, which is part of the message of this paper.
He says his study shows while there is land gained, there is a net loss of land. He points to many years of data from freshwater diversions at two locations, Davis Pond and Carnarvon.
It's still the same river, and it's still the same effect, whether it's a greater or lesser effect than how people, quantify that is up to dispute. But it's still the same river. It has the same nutrients in it. It has the same effect on plants when they're flooded far away.
Wilson contends there is a difference because those freshwater diversions were not designed to build land.
Those freshwater diversions were designed really to control salinity levels in certain parts of Breton Sound or the upper part of Barataria Bay, whereas river sediment diversions are being designed and will be operated to get that sand out into, again, Mid-Barataria or Breton Sound. And so we're talking about different land building processes. We're talking about different material being deposited out there. And so, making those, comparisons between what a freshwater diversion will do versus what the river sediment diversions can do is like maybe apples to oranges.
The 2017 Master Plan for a Sustainable Coast, that blueprint for large-scale restoration, is updated every 5 years, and Wilson is anxious to see how data from increased flood events of recent years will factor in.
We're modeling what's happening in the Mississippi River. And so we've seen over the last 10 years, we've seen it 15 years probably, increased frequency of opening of the Bonnet-Carré spillway. So the number of times the river's getting up high, extremely high, is increased. Right. So we want to understand what does that mean in terms of the way the sand, that bed load material that we want to use for sediment diversions, right? We want to understand how that bed load sand moves downriver. The transport of that sand down the river is important because we want to know how fast does the sand get downriver, how quickly does it get to the areas where we have river sediment diversions, so that we know, okay, when it's time to open a river sediment diversion, you want to make sure there's a good quantity of sand sitting there so that you maximize the amount of sand you get and minimize the amount of water you put out in Barataria Bay or Breton Sound.
Construction of Mid-Barataria is expected to begin sometime next year, and Mid-Breton perhaps in 2022.
Louisiana's early voters will find new machines when they begin casting their ballots next month.
Yeah, the state will be using leased voting equipment that's been upgraded to run on Windows 10, unlike Windows 7 used on previous machines. But How many people are going to be using them?
The last time voter turnout exceeded 50% was in 2003, the runoff election between Kathleen Blanco and Bobby Jindal. How to get people involved in the political process is a topic of this month's Louisiana Public Square, not just as voters, but candidates and the grassroots level as well. Here's an excerpt.
And we have some of the most gerrymandered districts in this state. And I think that you can make that case to a young person in New Orleans that they do need to get involved and care about what's going on in a House or Senate district up in North Louisiana, because who gets elected there is also making the laws that will impact people statewide. And I think another way that young people can get engaged is more young people running. When young people see people who look like them and sound like them and care about the same issues that they care about as candidates, they're more likely to sign up themselves.
Oh, I like to challenge a lot of time my students to think of that politics is not just about you. And so it's, you know, when people say, well, I don't see how this affects me. Well, first of all, it does affect you whether you realize it or not, number one. But then secondly, you have family members. You have mothers and you have grandmothers and you have people that you care about. And the point is that our governments are making decisions or choosing not to make decisions that affect the people that you love. So politics is part of how we take care of each other. It's part of how we govern ourselves. And so it's bigger than us. It's bigger than our interests. It's about how we take care of each other.
A lot of people are predicting that in the 2020 elections and as we saw in the 2018 elections, that turnout nationally is actually going to be going up, and attributing that to the increasing vitriol that we're seeing in the national conversation. And I'm curious whether you think that is a good trade-off. Is the higher turnout worth the, less civil discourse?
So look, I think the vitriol is terrible. The conflict is good, right? The way we get, I think that the nugget there is the engagement tool is actually the debate, the conflict. That's what the founders envisioned when they designed the political setup. Is they wanted vigorous debate around issues. I think it's important on college campuses. All too often there's a lack of diversity of opinion, and so you don't get that debate and people give up. The vitriol is a whole other story, right? If we could find that sweet spot, we're actually engaging in the issues, we're actually engaging in the differences of opinion and get to some outcome, but do it more civilly. That's the formula to me to get that turnout number higher and lose the downside of it. But it's a tough thing to do.
We talked earlier about how issues drive campaigns and get voters excited, but I mean we can't underestimate the power of personalities. I mean the reality is President Obama drove a youth vote that we never saw before. President Trump has driven out vote that people who historically had not voted, he's gotten more engaged. So I've found that, and particularly in Louisiana, we've been a personality-based state for a long time. It was never Democrat. You were long or anti-long. You were Edwards or anti-Edwards. It was, the parties really never existed until recently. And this race doesn't have I wouldn't characterize any of the three major candidates for governor as being real, exciting personalities. So it's going to have to be issue-driven on a statewide basis. But I don't underestimate the power of a strong personality. And as he said, if you can take the nastiness out of it, it would be nice. But some of that just comes with an edge. That's right. It just does.
Engaging Louisiana re-airs tonight at 8 p.m. Visit lpb.org/public square for more information.
Well, it is official, and check it out. Louisiana gained a double Guinness World Record this week for a grapefruit.
It's a grapefruit that grew in someone's backyard.
Yeah, it kept on growing, as a matter of fact. Ag Commissioner Mike Strain presented certificates to the new title holder of the biggest and heaviest grapefruit in the world. This is the grapefruit that first caught the eye of the grandson of Mary Beth and Doug Meyer. He noticed how big it was hanging from the tree in the backyard of their Slidell home.
When Daryl first noticed what a large grapefruit it was, we paid attention to it, and when we saw that it kept getting bigger and bigger, that's when we went and looked up the Guinness World Record to see what it was, and we weren't that far off.
Paying attention to it meant going to some extraordinary lengths to keep it on the tree.
It was windy and it was getting cold, and Mary Beth said that I think that thing may fall off. So we made a little hammock that we put it in to support the bottom of it. So when
And then we covered it when it was danger of frost. So we cared for it like our little baby.
Cared for it and kept watch over it as it grew. They watched as it even outgrew a handmade tape measure used to determine its size.
It won't even go on. See how it won't even go on? So it's bigger than 28 and 5/8.
With officials on hand to document everything needed for the grapefruit to secure the Guinness World Records for size and weight, it was time to cut it from the tree.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh!
There you go. Our baby
did it. Our baby's been born. Let's take it to the scale.
Officials made sure the scale was accurate so the weight would be precise. And at 7 pounds, 14.6 ounces, it made history.
That's a world record, guys.
The world record size measured 28 3/4 inches around. The process of making all this official, the Myers say, has been an ordeal in and of itself.
It was quite the process, and if I had to do it over again, I don't know if I'd do it. So.
Yeah, he put
But it
in
was
a
fun.
lot of work.
Yeah, it was fun.
More work in applying for the world record than growing the grapefruit.
And what about the tree that grew this king fruit? The Myers say there are some other big ones growing, but none rivaling this one and only.
That tree always produced a large white grapefruit. And these grapefruit are very, very delicious.
Yeah, that's right. Grapefruit!
It would probably take me like 3 days to eat that.
Yeah, I know. It is gigantic. So congratulations to everyone. And we got more congratulations to hand out. Superheroes welcome for the East Bank All-Stars, who this past Sunday became the first Louisiana team ever to win the Little League World Series. And they've been honored ever since returning from South Williamsport, PA, with more honors to come. In fact, they're expected to be guests of President Donald Trump at the White House.
It comes down to 13 players. We had 13 kids on the team. We all did our part, and that's what it takes.
So big congratulations to them. They made Louisiana proud.
They absolutely did.
That's our show for this week, everyone. Remember, you can watch anything LPB anytime, wherever you are, with our brand new app.
Download it free from your app store. This upgraded version features news, public affairs, documentaries, how-tos, and many more programs. And please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
For all of us here at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Moreau.
And I'm Natasha Williams. Thanks for watching.
Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Support comes from
Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.